Have you ever felt an emptiness that only an animal could fill? Like they can look straight into our souls. This is the story of Liam, an ordinary man whose path crossed with Cairo, a little lion abandoned to fate, destined to change his life forever. It was a hot, dusty afternoon on Africa's vast plains. The dry air carried the bitter scent of burnt grass when Liam spotted a fragile cub, big-eyed and trembling, alone in the wilderness. Who could leave such a vulnerable creature behind? Liam didn't know, but in that moment, he felt he couldn't turn his back on destiny. But raising a lion isn't exactly simple, you know how it goes. It's risky, borderline madness, it's love mixed with fear. Still, Liam embraced the challenge, offering Cairo not only food and shelter, but also a piece of his own heart. Years later, life separated them, as nature has its own rules. Liam moved on, convinced he'd never see his wild friend again. But destiny, oh, it loves to surprise us. An unexpected phone call brought Liam face to face with his past. Now he would confront the biggest question of his life. Cairo, the helpless little cub, had become the king of the savannah. Would Cairo still recognize Liam? Or worse, would he see Liam as a stranger, a threat? Stop for a moment and picture this reunion, your heart racing, the distant sound of a roar. Would you have the courage to face that? If you love real, heartwarming stories, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel to follow this and other incredible tales. Now, get ready to find out if the bonds of friendship can endure time, distance, and the wild instincts of nature. The sun scorched the red earth, and the buzz of flies cut through the silence like an annoying symphony. A middle-aged man, a vet with calloused hands and a heart that had seen it all, was fixing a fence when he saw something that stopped his world. A lion cub, scrawny, curled up under a bush, with eyes that seemed to beg for a miracle. The cub, barely a few weeks old, had shaky paws hardly holding up his tiny body. Have you ever seen a creature so fragile it seems to carry the weight of the world? The man didn't think twice. He scooped up the cub, feeling the feverish warmth against his chest, and ran home. But, look, saving a lion isn't just about good intentions, it's a pact with the unknown. Within weeks, the cub went from a wisp of life to a bundle of endless energy, tumbling in the yard and nibbling the man's shoelaces with a quirk that sparked laughter. The sound of the cub's hoarse yips echoed through the wooden house, mingling with the smell of warm milk the man prepared every morning. He fed him with a bottle, sang off-key songs to soothe his nighttime whimpers, and sometimes caught himself talking to the cub as if he understood every word. Who hasn't looked into an animal's eyes and felt they read your thoughts? The man knew raising a lion was risky, the neighbors were already whispering, and the cub's wild instincts wouldn't stay dormant forever. Still, every purr was like a vow, they were family now. But nature, oh, it has its own plans, doesn't it? Hold this moment. The warm night breeze, the weight of a choice that changes everything. The man watched the cub grow, muscles starting to ripple under his golden fur, and a question haunted him. How do you keep a lion tied to a human world? He wanted to protect him, but how far was fair? And, worse, how do you face the day the lion shows who he really is? The man's heart beat torn, and he had no idea what the future held. The man's yard was no longer the playground it once was. Now, the ground shook under the lion's heavy paws, knocking over buckets with a single swish of his tail. The scent of wet earth lingered after a light rain, but not even the breeze eased the weight in the man's chest. The lion, nearly 2 years old, had become a true predator. His golden fur gleamed in the sun, and his roars sent birds scattering in panic. Have you ever felt that ache of knowing something you love needs to go on without you? The man saw a wild spark in the lion's eyes, a call from nature he couldn't ignore. He loved him like family, but love, sometimes, means letting go. And, man, that truth hurt more than anything. The man spent sleepless nights, the sound of the lion's deep rumble from the enclosure echoing like a reminder of what was coming. He researched nature reserves, called experts, and every conversation confirmed the lion needed space, a life where he could run free, hunt, be the king he was born to be. But how do you say goodbye to someone who changed your life? The man stroked the lion's mane, feeling the warmth of the thick fur, and talked to him, half laughing, half crying. You're gonna rule out there, big guy, but don't forget me, okay? On the day of departure, He led the lion to the reserve's truck, his heart shattering as he saw the lion look back, confused. Can you believe sometimes the right thing hurts the most? But life, it always has surprises up its sleeve, doesn't it? Close your eyes for a second. The heavy silence after the truck's engine faded down the road. The man stood there, the wind carrying the echo of a roar that already felt like a memory. He returned to an empty house, unsure if the lion would understand the separation or if time would erase the bond they'd built. Could a lion carry a human in its heart? Or would the jungle swallow everything they'd shared? The man had no answers, but something told him this story wasn't over yet. Years passed, and the man settled into a quiet routine, but something always felt missing. On a gray morning, the smell of fresh coffee filled the kitchen when the phone rang, slicing the silence like a knife. On the other end, a tense voice from the nature reserve. It's about the lion. He's not doing well. The man's heart raced. Have you ever gotten news that throws you back to the past in a blink? The voice explained that the lion, now a full-grown adult, was isolated, refusing food, and the vets didn't know why. The man felt a pang, as if the universe was whispering, "Go to him." But what if the lion wasn't the same? He hung up, the echo of those words heavy as lead. The man spent the day restless, the sound of wind rattling the house's windows feeling like a call. He opened an old box, full of photos of the lion, the clumsy cub, the teenager stealing socks, the young lion looking at him with trust. Each picture was a stab of longing. Can an animal miss you the way you miss them? He knew going back to the reserve wouldn't be simple. The staff had warned that adult lions are unpredictable, and the lion's wild instincts might have erased any memory of the past. But, look, sometimes the heart speaks louder than reason, right? The man booked a flight, his backpack stuffed with hope and fear. He needed to see the lion, even if it was for one last goodbye. Picture this for a moment. The hum of the plane climbing, the emptiness of not knowing what to expect. When the man landed, the dry savanna air brought back the scent of earth he'd never forgotten. The reserve staff greeted him with wary looks, warning about the risks of approaching an adult lion. The man nodded, but his eyes shone with a certainty no one understood. But, hold on, would the lion still recognize the man who raised him? Or would this reunion be a mistake no one could fix? The reserve's metal gate creaked, and the air pulsed with the dry heat of the savanna. The man stepped into the enclosure, his heart pounding so loud it drowned out the buzz of insects around him. There was the lion, massive, his dark mane rippling like a crown in the sun. His yellow eyes locked onto the man, and the silence turned electric. Have you ever felt the weight of a moment where everything could change? The staff, a few yards away, gripped tranquilizer rifles, their faces tense, ready for the worst. The man took a step forward, his voice shaking as he whispered, "It's me, big guy." But, look, a lion isn't a dog. Wild instincts speak loud, and no one knew what those eyes were saying. The lion moved, every muscle under his golden fur seeming to calculate the next step. The sound of his heavy breathing cut through the air, and the man felt the ground tremble under the lion's paws. He wanted to believe in the bond they'd built, but what if time had erased it all? Who hasn't feared being forgotten by someone they loved? The man stood still, hands open, vulnerable, as the lion approached, his snout sniffing the air. The staff exchanged nervous glances, one whispering, "He's never done this before." Danger hung like a shadow, and the man could feel the weight of every second. Would the lion recognize him, or would this reunion end in tragedy? Feel the weight of this. The sun's heat on your neck, the gaze of a predator that could be friend or foe. The man held his breath, eyes fixed on the lion, searching for a sign, anything that recalled the cub of old. The lion stopped a few yards away, his tail swaying slowly. Then, something shifted in the lion's eyes, a spark, maybe a memory. But, hold on, what would he do now? One wrong move, and everything could crumble. The air felt still, thick with the scent of dry grass and tension. The lion, his golden eyes fixed on the man, took a step forward, and everyone's heart in the enclosure stopped. Then, against all odds, the lion lowered his head and advanced, not with bared fangs, but with a deep purr that rumbled like thunder. Can you believe it? He knocked the man to the ground, not with force, but with clumsy affection, rubbing his mane against the man's chest like in their cub days. The staff, jaws dropped, lowered their rifles, one muttering, "This isn't possible." The man laughed, his hands sinking into the warm fur, feeling the weight of a lifetime couldn't erase. But, look, that moment was more than a hug, it was a miracle. The lion licked the man's face, his hot breath mingling with the sound of his purring, filling the silence. It was as if the lion was saying, "I never forgot you." Who hasn't felt an animal bring back a lost piece of their soul? The man, still on the ground, looked into the lion's eyes and saw the same cub that chewed his laces, now wrapped in muscle and majesty. The staff exchanged glances, trying to grasp how a wild predator could act with such tenderness. Emotion took over, and even the toughest among them wiped away a discreet tear. But something in the lion's manner, so protective, so intense, left the man curious. Why did he seem to watch the surroundings, as if something else was at play? Let this sink in for a second. The warmth of the lion's fur, the sound of a purr that speaks of loyalty. The man stood, his heart full, but a shadow of doubt crossed his mind. The staff began to whisper, noting that the lion had never been like this with anyone. His behavior was more than affectionate, it was almost territorial, as if he was guarding the man from something no one saw. And, hold on, what could be strong enough to make a lion act this way? Something was coming, and the man had no idea what it was. The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of orange, while the scent of hot dust rose from the savanna floor. The lion still circled the man, his massive body moving with a grace that hid his strength. But something was off, he didn't relax, his eyes scanning the horizon, ears alert, as if sniffing out an invisible danger. Have you ever noticed how an animal senses what we can't see? The reserve staff, now calmer after the reunion, started murmuring, brows furrowed. "He's never been like this," one said, voice low. The man, still feeling the warmth of the lion's embrace, noticed the lion kept his body between him and the bush, like a shield. Can you believe a lion could be so protective? But that instinct raised a question. What was the lion sensing? One of the vets, a woman with a sharp gaze, approached, the sound of her boots crunching the dry grass. "The lion's marking you," she explained, pointing to how he rubbed his mane on the man, leaving his scent. "It's like he sees you as part of his territory." The man chuckled, a bit uneasy, but her expression was serious. Have you ever felt a chill you can't explain? He looked at the lion, whose deep purr now seemed more alert than affectionate. The staff exchanged glances, and tension crept back in. A territorial lion wasn't just loyal, it was dangerous. What if the lion saw the others as a threat? The man felt the weight of that loyalty, so pure, yet so risky. What did this mean for their future? Take a deep breath for a moment. The distant crackle of dry branches, the lion's fixed gaze on the horizon. The man touched the lion's mane, feeling the rough texture under his fingers, and wondered if this behavior was just love or a warning. The staff began discussing in hushed tones, some suggesting the man leave the enclosure for safety. But how could he abandon the lion now, after everything? And, hold on, if the lion was so protective, was something bigger lurking in the reserve? Something even the humans hadn't noticed yet? The twilight painted the savanna purple, and the air carried a faint smell of distant smoke, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. The lion, still glued to the man, let out a low growl, the sound reverberating in the chests of those nearby. Suddenly, a shadow emerged from the bush, a dominant lion, bigger than the other, with a black mane and scars that told tales of battles. Have you ever felt the air shift when danger arrives? The staff backed away, whispering warnings, while the man stood frozen, heart racing. The strange lion fixed its eyes on the man, reading his presence as a challenge. The protective lion, without hesitation, positioned himself in front, claws digging into the earth. Can you believe he'd choose to protect the man above all? The dominant lion took a step, the sound of its roars echoing like thunder, sending birds fleeing from the trees. The man felt sweat trickle down his neck, but the protective lion didn't budge, his body a wall, muscles tense, ready to act. Have you ever seen an animal risk everything for someone they love? The staff, now in a panic, raised their rifles, but the vet shouted, "Don't shoot. Let them sort it out." The man looked at the protective lion, heart tight, knowing this moment wasn't just about instinct, but loyalty. He wanted to yell, tell the lion to run, but something in the lion's eyes said, "Trust me." But, look, nature doesn't negotiate, and the dominant lion seemed set on attacking. How would this end? Hold your breath for an instant. The heavy silence between roars, the heat of an imminent clash. The man, helpless, watched the protective lion, pride and fear mixing within him. The staff held their breath, eyes locked on the scene. The protective lion didn't want to fight, but he wouldn't yield either. What if the dominant lion charged for real? Would the bond between the man and the lion be enough to prevent bloodshed? Or would nature's savagery speak louder? The savannah seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with the scent of dry earth and tension. The dominant lion advanced, eyes blazing, each step echoing like a drum on the hard ground. The protective lion, steadfast between the man and the threat, let out a roar that shook everyone's hearts, but his stance wasn't aggressive, it was defensive, a clear warning, "Don't come closer." Have you ever felt time slow down in a life-or-death moment? The man, frozen, saw the glint of loyalty in the protective lion's eyes, but also the weight of wild instinct driving both lions. The staff, rifles in hand, hesitated, knowing a wrong shot could make things worse. Can you believe a bond between man and animal could hold back such raw power? The dominant lion snorted, the sharp sound blending with the rustle of grass under its paws. It circled the protective lion, probing, searching for weakness, while the lion held firm, tail lashing the air. The man wanted to scream, beg them to stop, but his voice caught. Who hasn't felt the despair of seeing someone they love in danger? The vet, now beside the man, whispered, "The protective lion doesn't want to fight, he just wants to protect you." But protection, in nature, comes at a cost. One wrong move, and the clash would erupt. The man looked at the protective lion, pride and fear colliding, as if the universe was testing the bond they'd built. And, man, in that moment, anything seemed possible. The tension grew, and no one knew what would come next. Let your heart race with this. The pulse of your heart, the silence broken only by roars. The man, fists clenched, watched the protective lion, his body a living barrier against danger. The staff held their breath, eyes fixed on the deadly dance between the lions. The dominant lion paused, assessing the other, and something in its eyes shifted, a hesitation, perhaps. But would this pause be enough to avoid chaos? Or would the wild hierarchy demand blood before yielding? The sky now blazed with shades of red, and the wind carried the distant sound of hyenas laughing, as if the savannah knew what was at stake. The dominant lion stopped, its eyes locked on the protective lion, who held his ground, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Then, something unexpected happened. The bigger lion lowered its head, just a bit, and took a step back. Have you ever seen nature bend its own rules? The man, heart in his throat, felt a shiver, as if the universe had whispered a truce. The staff, stunned, lowered their rifles, while the vet murmured, "This is impossible." The protective lion eased up but didn't look away, as if saying, "I protect what's mine." Can you believe a bond between man and lion could shift the wild hierarchy? The dominant lion let out a deep huff, the sound mingling with the crackle of dry grass under its paws, and slowly began retreating into the bush. The protective lion stood still, mane swaying in the breeze, until the rival's shadow vanished among the trees. Who hasn't felt the relief of danger passing without a trace? The man dropped to his knees, hands trembling as they touched the warm ground, and looked at the protective lion, who turned to him, golden eyes shining with something beyond instinct. It was loyalty, it was love. The staff approached, still in shock, one shaking his head. "I've never seen a lion back down like that." But, look, that moment wasn't just about strength, it was about a bond that spoke louder than savagery. But peace, in nature, never lasts long, does it? Absorb this instant. The silence after the storm, the weight of a gaze that says it all. The man stood, heart full of gratitude but tinged with subtle sadness. He knew the lion belonged to this world, not his. The lion took a step toward the bush, as if sensing the same. Would this moment mark the end of their journey? Or did fate still hold one final farewell to seal what they'd lived through? The stars began to dot the sky, and the cool night air carried the faint scent of acacia. The lion, still by the man's side, turned slowly, his golden eyes reflecting the dim twilight. He let out a deep sigh, almost like a goodbye, and looked toward the bush, where the savannah called. Have you ever felt a moment carry the weight of a lifetime? The man, chest tight, touched the lion's mane one last time, feeling the rough texture he'd carry in his memory forever. "You're free, big guy," he whispered, voice breaking. The staff, a few yards away, watched in silence, respecting the scene. Can you believe a lion and a man could part as equals? The lion took a few steps toward the bush, the sound of his paws crushing dry grass echoing in the stillness. He paused, turned his head, and stared at the man, as if wanting to etch that face into his memory one last time. Who hasn't looked at someone knowing it's the end, yet feeling the love still pulse? The man smiled, eyes welling, and raised his hand, a simple gesture that said it all. "Go, I'll be okay." The lion answered with a low purr, almost a thank you, and then vanished into the savannah's shadows, his form blending into nature. The staff approached, one placing a hand on the man's shoulder. "You gave him a life. But, look, that goodbye wasn't just an end, it was proof of a bond time could never erase. Carry this with you." The gentle emptiness of the night, the echo of a purr fading away. The man stood there, gazing at the bush, his heart full and broken at once. He knew the lion would carry a piece of him forever, just as he'd carry the lion in his soul. But the savannah held its secrets, and the man wondered, would life cross their paths again? Or was that perfect moment the closure fate intended? Only time would tell, but one thing was certain, that bond would live forever. Have you ever stopped to think how animals, with their honest eyes and pure hearts, can teach lessons we carry for life? This man and this lion's story is more than a tale of a human and an animal. It's proof that love, loyalty, and respect can cross species, time, and even the savagery of nature. That night, under the savannah's stars, the fresh scent of earth still lingered as the man headed back to the jeep, his heart heavy but warmed. He knew the lion was where he belonged, free, majestic, carrying a piece of the bond they'd built. Who hasn't felt an animal change their soul forever? This journey reminds us that, sometimes, the greatest teachers have four paws. The lion taught the man about courage, about letting go of what you love, about trusting what can't be explained. And, look, maybe he taught you something too, right? Let this story linger. The silence of a tale that echoes, like a roar that never fades. If this tale warmed your heart, the next video YouTube suggests will move you even more. Give it a shot. And, hey, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any stories like this. In the comments, tell us, have you ever had an animal that changed your life? What lesson did they leave you? We'd love to hear.